All righty, here we go. Welcome, everyone. It's the 24th of June, 5-ish, this and that. Today I had prepared something that it's a result of the usual meandering on the internet, but on the one hand. On the other hand, I had this article that I wanted to do on Saturday by Žižek, Slavoj Žižek, on the metabolic rift. And I liked it because it was only a couple of years old. It discussed the Kohei Saito's book on Marx's eco-socialism, which I think is really important. It's a good article in the sense that it raises certain sort of fundamental questions. I mean, I don't think it's complete or that it's a perfect work. It raises a question of science, the role of science. More specifically, the idea that some scientists have created miniature cyborgs out of frog stem cells so that you have a sort of combination of a kind of hardware, software, biological bioengineering. And it's sort of an interesting idea. That this has been around and they've been working on this for a damn long time. But the idea is that you could get some sort of quasi-organic thing that could operate with some control that could consume, for example, plastic waste. And we've heard about this before about having something that would eat, that would consume or reprocess. And I'm not sure how that all, works, but it was an interesting idea. And Žižek sort of seized on it as this idea of trying to work through the problem of science. And because the ultimate goal is for, on the left is to try and figure out, what is science's proper place in, sort of ideological struggles. And so he goes through that, and I think it's a worthy little attempt to think about whether, a science under capitalism has memory or not memory or whatever. That it's, I think, a useful little, excursion. I think it gets into a little a little detour in the middle of the writing, but it's fine. It's more Žižek and useful because, in terms of his own interests, there's the appeal to Hegel and then the appeal to Lacan. And so you have these kind of integration of not only the more hardcore dialectical component, but also some question about subjectivity, which is what Žižek's all about. And, I mean, the dude has 2 PhDs, so whatever, you just let him yak. So that was the original article, and that's down below here on this page. But further beyond that, after that, is some people have been attracted to the idea of this one site that's being done by a fellow who is an early career Marxist. And he writes, he's prolific. He writes all the damn time. And he has a kind of position. He's positioning himself, and so career-wise, I think he'll be okay. He'll probably get a gig somewhere, academic gig, and whatever. He is, I would assert, a kind of tanky, but that's a pejorative that is problematic, and I think we often use it no different than calling people trots. And these little pejoratives have existed, at least in my lifetime, since, the rise of the new left. And so, these are always issues. They're important issues. They need to sort of identify. Everyone needs to work out their own ideological position. So I included a page from his site that is part of a collection that he sort of whipped together in terms of not self-publishing, but it's sort of close. I mean, he's one of the few guys who, by the time he gets his PhD, he's going to have several books. And so, he's kind of in position for a job somewhere because he's a dyed-in-the-wool dialectical materialist, sort of whatever. He's a Marxologist, I guess, sort of a Marxologist. So I included his work because it was interesting because of the other things I've been trying to think about and that we've been looking at, and that is we were looking at surplus value in the context of Capital in the second volume by Marx, and knowing, of course, that it would get explicated further in volume 3. The point is that surplus value remains an issue, somewhat incomplete and worth working through. And I just found when reading someone who is very committed to sort of a Marxist-Leninist line of one kind or another, that you can see that it's kind of this moment where surplus value is, at least this Carlos describes it as this node or whatever, and it's like magic, which I found pretty weird. That in effect, surplus value has a certain magical quality, which I find kind of that it's just. I would assume that if you're really a Marxist-Leninist, you wouldn't start talking in a kind of that surplus value just sort of happens. It's not magic, it's measurable, it's there. I've come on a more empirical side, as you sort of notice that and we have the power to look at it. And so talking about it as magic or as kind of then surplus value occurs, I'm going, nah, don't do that. It's like he's sort of ignoring an entire philosophical tradition that is not complicated and not contradictory to a Marxist-Leninist line. They just think he hasn't gotten there yet, and he'll get there. It's very orthodox, and that's fine. Everyone has to have a kind of purpose, and he's created this little site, Midwestern Marx, that does all of these things. It has a kind of web presence. It has an institutional presence. It has a journal. If you were going to build an empire, this is how you build empires on the internet. But that aside, it had some useful links, and that's what I'm going to begin talking about today. Partially because it was useful for us, not because it's Marxist-Leninist, but because it has certain technical tools that I think we should consider. And it's nothing that I'm going to immerse myself heavily in, although, there are things that, if I could learn them quickly, I probably will learn them. For example, this is the site that I wanted to begin with is a site called ProlaWiki, and the Proletarian Encyclopedia. So, if you're going to pick one side or the other, you're going to be with the proletarians and not with the bourgeoisie, right? Even though, you have to cop to, if you're a member of the professional managerial class, it's always going to be a problem. You can have the affiliations, but that there's a educational infrastructure, and it is bourgeois, and your own role in it is made complicated. Because on the one hand, you're always trying to transcend a class, particularly if you have proletarian roots. Some people don't. They just don't. I mean, you have a bourgeois family, whatever. You have all these other elements in it, and, you sort of have to work through what those things are, because I'm sure that there are X number of academic Marxists who, they have pension plans and, they probably own property. They have a second home somewhere, whatever. It's the Bernie problem on the one hand. So political correctness or whatever, wokeism should not be an issue. It's just a very interesting idea. Now, in looking further at the ProlaWiki, you see, you can create a wikis have been around, right? Since the beginning of the interwebs. And wikis have a kind of open source component. The problem, of course, relative to Wikipedia is that there's this sort of massive infrastructure that you sort of have to see whether it does or doesn't fit. And so and there's several kinds of these wikis. There's not one Wikipedia. I mean, there is one Wikipedia, but there are all these other secondary wikis that come up and down and whatever. There's a wiki for this and that, and some are better than others. Some disappear. There was a wiki that attempted to put the entire MEGA essentially on a wiki, and I think that got screwed up somehow because of publishers and other property related issues. So that's by way of saying, should there be a TAC wiki? That's an interesting question, and I will raise it because as I scroll down here, because we're going to talk about this other stuff above. But there's this, I just wanted to bring to people's notes, whether it's a good or a bad idea, is MediaWiki, a free and open source wiki software. And it seems fairly powerful and is interesting. And it's interesting because it, it integrates a bunch of other stuff, and that's kind of cool. It has a problematic relationship at the present moment. When I looked up MediaWiki on Mastodon, there is an interest, there's some stuff there, but the latest news on that is that there's a difficult issue between GitHub and MediaWiki. So I don't, the issue is that GitHub, which allows you to put, you build software, has some problem. It's not advanced enough, whatever that means, to be integrated with MediaWiki. So there are these other issues of compatibility and other matters that are more best left for other nerds. But I like the idea of a TAC wiki, which could be quite powerful, I think, in the larger picture, just simply because if we have an idea that sort of works and we kind of stick to it, others can follow, or we can join. We can become federated in that sense on the Mastodon model. So anyway, so that's a long way. I didn't necessarily want to join the Pro Wiki because for a variety of reasons, but it's interesting that they have an entire screening mechanism to determine whether you're, as an editor, I think they're okay about anybody taking, doing stuff or consulting the Marxist-Leninist encyclopedia called ProLewiki. But let me go through this, and it's just interesting to see the kind of idea that some people would refer to at one level as kind of political correctness, or are you properly disciplined as a Marxist? And it just raised the question for me, what do I believe? What things could I believe? The more interesting thing is that once you answer their questions, and there are technically 13, a minimum of 13, a maximum of 15, I think, questions that you could or couldn't answer, or address. It's not that there's one answer. It's just they want your opinion on stuff. They want to know kind of ideologically where you sit. And it's important because, in fact, you should have that kind of a set of positions, to determine how Marxist are you, how Leninist are you a Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, and it's not that easy. You sort of need to get a sense of how you default to certain things, because ultimately these kinds of other people have issues, and there's this kind of are there ideological kind of barriers or borders beyond which you cannot go? That's a useful question, and that I think it is a matter of, and without getting into the technical basis of it, there's a concept called autocriticism, and that self-criticism is actually very important. And from a left point of view, self-criticism is incredible. Is the key to making movements work or not work, and it's part of a whole business about so many movements or so many activities have failed because of adventurism or treason. That is, people are actually, they go, well, I can't do this anymore, I better tell the cops or something, whatever. This does happen, and it's sort of fascinating because it is how the surveillance state operates in that sense. So anyway, so this is from their page about whether you wanted to become an editor on their page. Doesn't mean that you can't read anything. It's just that if you sort of join their little group and become the next part of the centralized elite, you're going to get into a kind of ideological struggle. So, due to the nature of our project, we ask these questions to evaluate the ideological consistency of those who wish to join our editorship. ProLaWiki is a Marxist-Leninist encyclopedia. As such, we expect our prospective editors to have a good grasp on Marxist theory and agree with our principles, and we'll look at that in a moment. Criticism of our principles is accepted as long as you present them in your account request. Defend your arguments as best you can. They will be considered to evaluate your entry. If you're more comfortable writing in another language, you can fill out a request on another language instance of ProLaWiki, that is, a German, a Greek, Spanish, French, or Portuguese. After we receive your account request, it'll be submitted to the editorship to discuss and vote on. This is democratic centralism. Please allow a few days for our response. Once approved, an account can be used on any language instance. So, whatever, fighting in German or Greek or Spanish or French or Portuguese. Be detailed and elaborate as you can be in answering the questions. The more expansive an answer is, the better the deliberation process regarding your application will be. A wrong answer doesn't necessarily mean rejection. Do your best and don't stress. I'm just interested in what happens if you're rejected, and are you will the NKVD come to your door or whatever? Where did you find ProLaWiki from? How familiar are you with it? This is the first set has 8 mandatory questions or sections of questions which have multiple sub-questions. Comment what made you want to join ProLaWiki and what areas you are interested in contributing to. Number 2, what current of Marxist thought do you uphold? Describe as thoroughly as needed your path towards your current political perspective. Number 3, have you read our principles? Comment on your agreements or objections to their points. Number 4, what is your understanding of gender? Should Marxists support the LGBT community? Now, that's an important point. We'll go back through these, but I'll note that the Communist Party of Russia is an anti-LGBT party. Number 5, what is your position on Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong? How would you describe their historical role? Share any comments or critiques you have regarding them. Number 6, what are your thoughts on China, Vietnam, Cuba, DPRK, and Laos? Do you believe any of these countries is socialist? Why or why not? Number 7, what is settler colonialism? Are there any countries that still fit that description, and what should be done regarding them? Further, what is to be done about the decolonization and liberation of indigenous peoples, ethnic minorities, and immigrant groups in your country? 8, what is your analysis of the situation in Palestine? What do you think of the 2023 October 7 events and the groups involved from both sides of the conflict? It is Fisher cut bait time. So those are the mandatory 8 questions. And so of the second set, you've got to choose 5 of these, which is interesting only for a variety of reasons. Well, anyway. So here's the second set. You only have to pick 5. In your own words, how would you describe dialectical materialism? Number 2, what are your thoughts on national liberation or the concept of land back? Either one. Have you read anything on Marxist feminism? What are your perspectives on it? Do you think abolishing the nuclear family should be a goal of the communist movement? If so, how would it be abolished? What do you think is the most pressing issue for communists in your country? What is your opinion of communist parties there? What do you believe is the main difference between Marxism and other anti-capitalist movements? What is imperialism, and how do institutions and programs like the IMF, Belt and Road Initiative, and the World Bank relate to it? And the last one of 5 questions, have you read works from Marxists pertaining, but not limited to, those from historical or existing socialist states? Please note some that stood out to you, and what contributions to Marxist thought that they added, and why you like them. You can see this could be a pretty extensive little thing that you could write, but it's an interesting journal kind of problem as well. Now, there's some optional questions which they say are not necessary, but could give you an advantage, as though you're gaming this of application process. Do you have any comments or feedback about this application process? We will use it to, this is auto-critique, right? We will use it to improve the process. And finally, do you have any familiarity or skill with any programming language or MediaWiki? And then below, I put in the link to MediaWiki because principles and MediaWiki. And let me go through the principles. But MediaWiki, as they suggest, I've suggested, is an interesting idea as a kind of project because it could position TAC, for example, in a very interesting place relative to the other kinds of platforms, etc. Principles of ProLaWiki. This text is an ideological guide to the project. Any criticism of this text is accepted in our discussion page. Our principles were last updated on 5 January 2023. It has core tenets with a political line. The political line is we are guided by Marxism-Leninism, mainly the works of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and Vladimir Lenin. Based on that, ProLaWiki upholds the currently developing dictatorships of the proletariat in the following countries: Republic of Cuba, People's Republic of China, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Socialist Republic of Vietnam, Lao People's Democratic Republic, anti-imperialism. Although the below states are bourgeois dictatorships, we critically support them, or we critically support them. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, the Russian Federation, the Republic of Belarus, the Syrian Arab Republic, the plurinational state of Bolivia, the Republic of Nicaragua, the state of Palestine, the Islamic Republic of Iran. We critically support them insofar as their national bourgeoisie's interests align with those of its proletariat. That is, specifically in the struggle against domination by foreign capital and NATO imperialism, which we consider the primary imperialist force in the world. In the final instance, we support the workers and oppressed peoples of these countries against their ruling class. And then there's a section on anti-oppression. We are against any form of oppression or glorification of oppression against ethnic groups, women, and LGBTs. Class reductionism is an anti-Marxist position. As such, this includes opposition to reactionary and social chauvinist movements, such as, but not limited to, and these are folks I hope that we here all sort of are against: fascism and neo-fascism, Nazism and neo-Nazism, Zionism, Strasserism, fourth political theory, National Bolshevism, LaRoucheism, and patriotic socialism. So that is, kind of interesting. And let me mention that they mentioned MediaWiki, which I think is interesting only because it may be just simply anachronistic and an anachronistic interest of mine, because I had, ambitions to build wikis way, way long ago, and then gave it up because nobody else was interested in it, or there's a lot of gang warfare, I would assert, on Wikipedia. But anyway, that's another story. I included here on this page a definition from Wikipedia of what democratic centralism, and it is an organizational principle, and it is featured in most left-type organizations in one way or another, some of which are more rigorous than others. Organizational principle of communist states and of most communist parties to reach dictatorship of the proletariat. In practice, democratic centralism means that political decisions reached by voting processes are binding upon all members of the political party. It is mainly associated with Leninism, wherein the party's political vanguard of revolutionaries practiced democratic centralism to select leaders and officers, determine policy, and execute it. Democratic centralism is primarily associated with Marxist-Leninist and Trotskyist parties, but has also occasionally been practiced by other democratic socialist and social democratic parties, such as South Africa's African National Congress. Scholars have disputed whether democratic centralism was implemented in practice in the Soviet Union and China, pointing to violent power struggles, backhanded political maneuvering, historical antagonisms, and the politics of personal prestige in those states. Socialist states, such as the former Soviet Union and present-day China, have made democratic centralism the organizational principle of the state and the political power principle being unitary power. And I would assert to you that you can see sort of good and bad versions of this, and lots of not so democratic, or at least not so humanist kind of positions. So there's all that kind of stuff at work. And I think it's important for people because, people draw certain lines about, whether you're a true communist and blah, blah, blah. Our friend Carlos L. of Midwestern Marx is proudly, proclaims that he's a member of the CPUSA, which doesn't necessarily determine everything that he believes, but CPUSA is, it's been there and through thick and thin, through Stalin and post-Stalin. And I would assert it's just interesting and perhaps even anachronistic for people in the FBI to probably populate the CPUSA. But I always find it useful because it takes a position. Sometimes it's a good one, sometimes it's a bad one. Sometimes it's you wonder, why are they doing this, and why does it align itself with certain other really crazy ideas? So that it's always kind of interesting. So anyway, being a member of the CPUSA may be like trying to revive being a member of the Whigs. But anyway, so that's kind of as I've yammered here. I just want to introduce this. I hope people have questions or ideas. I wanted to go down each question. In fact, I could talk about my position, not that I'm going to hold to it in this particular discussion context, but I just think it's useful if you don't have to share here, but it's worthwhile to think about. I happen to like wikis because they're open source, they're international and global, and particularly since they're multilingual, that it's also important there in that context as well. Now, that being said, I think Wikipedia is a kind of fascist entity, and it's incredibly problematic in terms of not only condensing language, but also is certainly used for mischief by people. People who will join the editorial policy and make mischief of what are facts. So there's a lot of disinformation in Wikipedia. It wouldn't be that way in, for example, in this one, because obviously they have a rigorous editorial process, however complicated that might be. And what current of Marxist thought do I uphold? Well, I'm a little ecumenical about this, and probably I hold a maybe a Maoist position. Actually, if I really had to admit where I was going to, but I have other intellectual interests that I think are important. You can't be slavish to a MLM procedure, particularly in the American context, because it does commit itself to certain disciplinary positions, including violence. Describe as thoroughly as needed your path towards your current political perspective. So I say, well, at various moments in the new left, I was probably rim to SDS, and I went to college with people who, were of that ilk. A couple of people who eventually dropped out, who were part of the Weather Underground, for example. And so I'm actually familiar with a student body infiltrated by surveillance state intelligence operatives. So It's just interesting to see how that operated in those heady days of the New Left. And further, when I was in graduate school, I tried to sort of stay away from those kinds of groups, since where I went to graduate school had a variety of overdetermined kind of perspectives, ranging from RCP to PL to the Trots to some very strict Marxist-Leninists who on the faculty. All those. So, I've had contact with all those kinds of things. And so my own position has been relatively, I don't know, at one level entryist, because, I had an interest in third partyism, one of my jobs. It wasn't fully developed and as a party, and has become since more problematized. That is the Greens, for example. I had a thing for the Greens for a fair amount of time. But I've been a registered Democrat most of my electoral life as a citizen. So I'm an entryist in that particular perspective. But I think, the Democratic Party has a lot of range to it, including, Bernie Sanders, et cetera. So that's a lengthy explanation that I would probably winnow down. And then reading their principles, I just talked about the principles, and there's some pretty complicated principles that are built in there. I write a thing in favor of Ukraine, but my own position relative to the post-war Ukraine will be probably for there's several socialist parties. So in that sense, I align myself with the certain nationalist positions in Ukraine, but also am skeptical of capitalism and the imperialist implications of NATO that will be necessary in order to protect Ukrainian national sovereignty. So I have that issue. Belarus is just a puppet of Russia, so that's problematic. And Russia itself, I have issues of critique. So for example, I'm certainly on the side of the Finns relative to the Finns versus the Russians. Because I think the Finns are truly nationalistic in their own really weird way. But I think, I admire them for that, to be able to have held off the Soviet Union for X number of years. So that's another interesting thing. But they've managed to sort of skirt the issue until they needed to join NATO. So in that sense, I'm still on the Finnish side, which unfortunately is in favor of NATO imperialism in that particular sense. But in some ways, from the important capitalist transitions that must be made to eco-socialism, I would weigh on the Western side rather than on the Russian side. And so therefore, I would have a problematic relationship with various national sort of bourgeois, regimes. So that's kind of okay. I'm going to stop there, but you could see how you could get really nuts about explaining what your position on various things. And one should ask your question, well, not that you're going to have to swear this in front of anyone, but I think it's important for everyone to challenge what your positions are. For example, to skip below, how do I feel? Am I an anti-imperialist? And IMF, Belt and Road, and World Bank, I think there should be a single institution. And yes, I think it should be global. And yes, I think the United Nations is actually a way to get there, because I think that 189 or whatever the hell it is number of member institutions, despite the non-alignment and all the other kind of sub issues, I think we do need to have a kind of world federalism that unifies the economies. And ultimately, as a socialist, I think it's probably going to have to be a socialist construction, because the only way that capitalism survives is in the interstices among regional capitalism. They just steal money. They're just doing this all the fucking time, and you got to stop that. It's got to be collectivized or globalized in that sense. So in that sense, how do you get there? That's a whole nother question. And then the Marxists I read and blah, 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 so, okay. So I shared a little bit there. I have a critique of every one of these things. Bolivia is sort of okay. The Syrians are fascists. The state of Palestine, it's not fully a state, although it's getting there, and I hope that happens. But it's problematized because of various internal elements that are, simply tribal in many ways. And of course, the Islamic Republic of Iran, I do think it does have a national bourgeoisie that aligns with the proletariat. And there is a severe and important left in Iran, but it tends to be quiet just simply because of who's in charge. Nicaragua has that same kind of problem going all the way back to, it's just sad that what was originally, the anti-Somoza, whatever, has turned into cults of personality. It's, kind of bad rule. So that's a problem. Belarus, as I said, is a stooge of, and they've got to get rid of what's his name, Lukashenko, because he stole his last election. I mean, it's just absurd in terms of serving Russia. And then Venezuela is a problem for all the usual post Hugo Chavez reasons. So whatever, got lots of issues. And yes, they all are bourgeois dictatorships with, the usual issues. A couple are guided by cults of personality. One, a couple of state religions, whatever. Theocracies really corrupt the theocracy, whatever. Okay, I've yacked enough. You can talk. Anyone? No one likes her. Oh, here we go. John.
Yeah, this is relatively trivial, but after, I don't even know how long it's been around, but Wikipedia, and
Yes.
Anybody referring to these kinds of things, they say wiki. You are the first person in all these years I've heard say wiki. What is that about?
It's because I'm really old, and it was originally it had that kind of Hawaiian idea behind it. So I'm probably a retcon person in terms of what wiki refers to. The original pronunciation,
like tiki, with a W instead of a T, I guess. Okay.
Yes, but I'm giving it the Hawaiian pronunciation. But it has that Polynesian component in it.
Okay.
but I will, defer to proper whatever current pronunciation.
I don't know if it's proper. That's the only way I've ever heard it ever is wiki. But hey, I don't think I'm that much younger than you, but whatever. Just had to ask. I'm a nut about stuff like that. It's my own OCD thing.
Yes, that's probably it. My mom's from Hawaii, so I think it's wiki. Anyway.
And are you thinking of Tikipedia?
That's what I said. It's like tiki with a W instead of a T.
Tiki, yes, like tiki.
Tiki Torchpedia?
Yes, that's right.
No, not Tiki.
I didn't see grammar Nazis listed on this list here.
Yeah, I know.
Don't align with.
Not a fully comprehensive list, but whatever.
Just on a technical note regarding GitHub, if you have a project on GitHub, you can convert that into, you can use its website feature. You can basically have a statically hosted website that's based off of your code. In addition to that, so your project basically on GitHub provides issue tracking, a website, the storage of the code, and a wiki if you so choose. So that functionality is available.
Yeah, I am a big fan of GitHub because there's some really good projects on there. A lot of them are academic projects, and I think it's just to me it's very exciting. I just haven't had the time to do my own GitHub thing.
Just a shame Microsoft slurped it up. But they have the infrastructure and capability, I guess. Capital.
Anyone else? Comments? Brickbats? Questions?
Yeah, and I think anything I say is going to be really naive the way you've traipsed through the entire world and all its issues with a lot of depth of knowledge. But Midwestern Marx, their institute is putting forth something like what kind of, or is it an organization that they're building?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And so you apply to get in. I'm sorry.
Well, no, that's different. This thing is not part of Midwestern Marx. Midwestern Marx is just an interesting phenomenon, and I sort of got to Prolowiki from Carlos L's thing.
Okay.
But he himself is kind of a big promoter. I assume he's on the editorial board of Prolowiki.
Okay, so it's the wiki that, okay. I was following Midwest Marx for a while there. And Eddie started like really buying into what Jimmy Dore was saying. And maybe it's a cult. This was over a year ago, I believe. Yeah, at least a year ago. And I just kind of like something in me, I just kind of left their universe. Not that I was real involved, but I just wonder. Carlos, I just really enjoyed learning from him the limited amount of times I have. So, okay, so it's the wiki that you're okay.
Yeah,
thanks.
It's not identical to Midwestern Marx. Midwestern Marx is I think, and with all due respect, for example, Rand Paul, because he didn't want to kowtow to the standard, what is it, ophthalmology organization, the national. Rand Paul created his own little accrediting agency.
Oh gosh, that weasel.
And so. That there is that tendency, and I would say that with respect, that's kind of what Carlos L is doing. But I think you want to assert his own. You put your flag out there, and he is into the. I mean, after all, he did a book, an anthology of classical Marxist texts on dialectical materialism. So he's truly into, that position.
Yeah. And the institute, those two guys have high aspirations. So that falls right in.
Indeed. I mean, I expect to see them at the next, the next international.
Yeah, there we go. And I was, when I first popped in, I thought, are you talking about TAC, like aligning themselves or being part? And I think I just got confused. But it might be interesting to have presence as TAC in organizations. I'm not saying this one, but I'm just saying.
No, I mean, linkage is important. I think networks are important. There's just issues that are going to come, but you don't have to worry about that. But the problem, of course, is that once you start committing yourself to certain positions, you begin to turn in, they turn into these subcults, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, well, this person is X, and so therefore they can't really be members of our little in group. And that's the kind of the common sectarian position. It's the same as the issue of class unity, the class unity people, because they were always very consistent about their Marxist positions and were constantly, kind of creating trouble or created trouble for themselves within DSA. That doesn't mean to say that some of them aren't members of DSA, but it's clear that they're trying to create something that is less troubled by certain DSA positions. For example, some people had issues with Jamal Bowman, and there were like resolutions to condemn Jamal Bowman within the context of DSA, blah, blah, blah. So whatever.
Yeah.
It's just sad, and I'm not speaking for the Democratic Party in any way, but it's just problematic. It has all of these other sub issues that are problematic elements of being in the Democratic Party and having to fight, a really terrible, the usual problems of American electoral politics.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to take a position at one on the one hand or another, because Bowman has constituents, a wide range of constituents, and some are really problematic relative to, what money is there or not there, and same thing with AOC, et cetera, whatever. And these are all problems that get marginalized, like the squad is, with respect, continually marginalized in the context of Democratic Party politics. And so, you have to sort of pick your battles.
Yeah, or grow the squad.
It's difficult. I mean, Bernie is supporting Jamal Bowman, and that's fine. Whatever. Doesn't diminish my support of Bernie, but then Bernie has a certain position relative to the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's fine. I mean, whatever. I vote for him,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I'm in a cult, I guess that's the cult I'm in. But, it has to be seen in this broader context.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you.
No other things. They can be a little doctrinaire. I mean, I think they got thrown off of some server or something because they had a party position, and they're whining about it. I noticed they're on Discord. They're just put themselves on Discord. You can see the kind of issues that go under there.
Who just put themselves on Discord?
Midwestern Marx.
Oh yeah, no, I've been looking at. Well, you sent me the link.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's just fascinating.
I have not.
It isn't.
I haven't seen much on Jimmy Dore lately, so I don't
No,
think that's
it was a while ago, but I just thought, oh gosh, I can't anymore.
Yeah, no, I understand.
That was a while ago, but still.
By the way, Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat, and I think that's something to appreciate about him, even though he has to caucus with them and all that. But I wish the squad on math would say they're not Democrats either, but fuck, what are we going to do? He can do it, why not them?
Yes, that's true too. Some people don't have as solid whatever constituency as others.
So, and that list of countries where the organization said they critically support those countries to the extent that their national bourgeoisie, the relationship to the national bourgeoisie to the proletariat in those countries.
Yeah.
What organization was that came up with this list?
Oh, well, that's the Prolowiki people.
Oh, okay.
They're just making a list. I mean, I think it probably is consonant with certain certain communist parties. I think all of these have communist parties. There's communist parties in all of these places, including Palestine.
I see. Okay, so they're talking about the communist parties in those countries, or they're talking about the country?
Well, the communist parties would identify with this Prolowiki thing, and define their countries as being run as being bourgeois dictatorships. That's what's going to happen if Trump takes over. It'll be more of a bourgeois dictatorship or whatever.
I guess I'm a little confused when they say they support those countries. I think about Russia and I don't see anything particularly socialist about it.
Well, it has an organized communist party, which is about 20 to 30% of the electorate.
Right.
I mean, they vote for Putin, but it's a fairly big party, and there's tremendous nostalgia for Stalin still. I can't remember what they call the Communist Party of Russia. It's got a different name, but it's there, and they they do public stuff. They bring out their pictures of Stalin and shit like that.
That's exciting.
Pretty frightening, actually, but whatever. The Venezuela, of course, has a ruling party that is socialist and communist or whatever. Belarus, I don't know. I mean, it has a ruling party, and it is, I guess, left oriented, but it's a dictatorship. I mean, it's got Lukashenko, who rigged his election. What's her name? Is I don't know if she's in exile. I guess she is. The actual winner of the last election. They're just waiting for him to die, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, doesn't seem like a great guy.
Oh well, Lukashenko. I mean, he's the longest. I mean, beyond anyone else. I mean, longer than Putin, dictator in Europe. And then the Syrian Arab Republic. I mean, Christ's sake. I mean, I mean, Jesus, a permanent state of war. And then
North Korea is no great shakes either.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. But Bolivia is not quite so bad. Nicaragua is a cult of personality. The Ortega thing. Palestine obviously unresolved. And then of course Iran has a comment. They have a fairly big left party, but it's kind of like the same issue with Belarus. It's got a theocracy in charge, but a very powerful a left that's there. They just and they occasionally get oppressed or whatever, but but they're still there, much like Russia's left communist party. And then obviously they align with these things. They don't align with other places like Cambodia or Myanmar, which they should in some ways, but they don't, I think for fairly obvious reasons. So so Cuba is Cuba, even in post Castro. The PRC, of course, is the PRC, and Korea, that's North Korea and all the usual things, and Vietnam is a fairly interesting mixed economy at the present moment, but still, it's it is run by their Communist Party, and I think Laos is that way as well. So, whatever. But they're just stating they're staking. Prolowiki upholds the currently developing dictatorships of the proletariat in. I mean, it's complicated. China is the only one of the 5 in BRICS, for example. Whatever. I mean, since the Red Scare, it's really difficult to be a communist in the United States, right? I think I've shown enough stuff on my end to show the issues,
Oh, it's going to get a lot more difficult if Trump is elected, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's not like we're going to run around, going to every CP meeting or whatever. It's because the CP, I would assert that there's probably 10% of the CP is police informers of one kind or another.
Oh, is that because the police have gotten really progressive recently?
No, I think it's been a tradition.
No, I'm kidding.
I think it's a tradition that every fucking communist thing in the United States has been infested with the FBI, and every local police force that has an intelligence division, for example. Okay. at 7 o'clock is going to be the writing workshop, and then after that, game time. I don't know if Joe has other things that go in between. Yes, Joe, please sever the thing. Let's cut it off. Let me thank you for your interest. As I said, folks here don't have that great a clarity about their own or whatever political lines or whatever, and that's a product of being in a nice, reasonably pluralistic society where we can sort of we have sort of a market, a party market of some kind. But we have a duopoly, but people have their own kind of wackiness underneath that, and needless to say, that's kind of, it's going to be problematic if it becomes more chaotic.